Welcome to the Power of One. Today, we're going to have a great conversation with Dr. James. I am super excited because I want to know all about my grandbaby's personalities. I have a 1 year old grandbaby, and she's forming this personality, which I think is cute and unique. My 6 year old grandson and my other 5 year old granddaughter, all of them have different personalities. And I'm just intrigued about how personalities are formed. Welcome to the show, Dr. James.
Thank you for having me on. So glad to be here again. And really interesting topic about personalities and how they might show up in the people that we love. So thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. I know my mom and dad would say, like, I'm the baby and the only girl. I have two older brothers. That my personality has been perfect from the time I was an infant to now.
Absolutely perfect.
I'm almost positive they would say that. But let's talk about personalities. How do we define, or how would you define a personality?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that some people would think about personalities in terms of like that internal part of who you are, how you show up, how you get energy, might be also part of that in terms of like, are you extroverted or introverted or a middle blend of some of that? What are the ways of how you communicate and interact with people that are just like a part of who you are? Even some of the things that might excite you are a part of it. Are you someone who likes to kind of figure things out, or are you someone where things kind of open up? So I think like all those kind of unique parts of who you are, almost as unique as our fingerprint, I think is part of our personality, and it's all a spectrum for most of us.
I am really amazed at my grandbabies. Now, mind you, they look at me, I'll give them whatever. They smile at me, I'll give them whatever. But all three of my grandbabies are dynamic and they're their own person, and they're still babies. But my 1 year old granddaughter, she'll be two, January 28th. When I tell you she is something already, and I'm looking at her like, how like Dr. James, break that down for me. Like if one of her siblings will grab her toy, she's like,
Mhm.
mine. I'm like, okay, wait. So do you know they're like twice your size, first of all, but she's holding her own. How do we form personalities as infants and babies?
Yeah, it's one of those things that people kind of go back and forth. I mean, I believe it's a little bit of both in terms of, the nature versus nurture. Is it just a part of who you are? That's who they were going to be no matter what, right?
Mhm.
That's the kind of like the internal, the kind of just nature. Or nurture, is it because of family environment, or is it because of who other people around your grandbabies? Even some people have said the position that you might be born in. Are you the oldest? Are you the middle? Are you the youngest? These are all parts of the nurture. Sorry, the being nurtured by those around you, and how that can shape your personality. And like I said, I believe it's a little bit of both. I think there's
Mhm.
some things that are just that was just who you're going to be. That's just how you're going to show up in the world. And then
Mhm.
there's some things that can change. If you were in a family of five, might be different if you were in a family of three. If you were
Mhm.
born in, Jackson, Mississippi versus being born in, Manhattan, there might be some things that could be very different in how you show up. And so I think all those things influence our personalities, not to mention when we get into some of the difficult stuff like trauma or
Mhm. Mhm.
difficulties or natural disasters or whatever, these things that can shape you at a young age, or
Mhm.
at any part of development, that might shape how you think about the world and alter your personality in some way.
So it's funny you say that, and thinking about negative personality and positive personality. So coming up, and I'll speak about my family, coming up and me being the baby and the only girl. So yes, I was spoiled. I wasn't a brat, but I was spoiled.
He was
And my,
taken
my
care
two
of.
older, my two older brothers. So my oldest brother, uh used to use drugs for years, and he's very open about that. And in my mind, I'm saying we had, for lack of a better word, the perfect childhood coming up. Mommy and daddy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My daddy, he went out, he worked, but my dad cooked, he cleaned. If anything was broken around the house, it was not broken for no more than 5 minutes. So in my mind, I'm like, bro, how could you go out in the street and use drugs and get in this lifestyle? And then of course, when someone uses drugs, that alters their personality. It's no longer my oldest brother's name is John. It's no longer John. You know what I mean? That's somebody totally different. How does that happen? And how does those things happen when you're coming up, and we're going to say, for lack of a better word, a perfect household? How does your personality in one environment alter when you're in another environment?
Yeah, like thanks for sharing that about your brother. And yeah, like drug use, drug misuse and abuse that can significantly alter our personality because that also alters our brain chemistry, just the ways that we think and operate. For some folks who get to the place of being to the place where they might have an addiction, the brain thinks like it's as precious as air and water, and so your behaviors shift and change. And so the things that you might do could be different than your original personality. And it alters that. And now you're completely, could be a completely different person. And so I've seen that. I've seen that for people who have experienced drug use. I've seen that for people if you had a fire in your house. I've seen that with people where they've dealt with assault or trauma. Once again, it also might happen with like if it was the parent, right? Going back to the nurture part, if you experience some trauma or difficulty, and this is where you can intersect like racism, sexism, all the different levels of injustice. Now you might parent a certain way, and now you might create a level of maybe worry or anxiety or fear, or even on the other side, anger or desire to make a change. All of those things could shape someone's personality at a young age. And so, I think like those are the things that help to inspire and impact all of us. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, maybe sometimes for the good.
Right, right. Now, trauma, you touched on that, which I think is major. And when I think about these young teenagers shooting and killing each other, that boggles my mind. But if we touch on a little bit of a child who has been brought up in a household where domestic violence occurred every day, and they start to desensitize themselves from pain, then they're probably able to hurt someone because those emotions have died technically a long time ago. How is it, or should I say that is a possibility for someone to become so desensitized when they're coming up, and then their personality gets altered, and
Yeah.
then they become this cold, heartless person. Speak about those personality traits.
It's really interesting. I have done some work with folks who are on the front lines, helping folks who are abusive or who have uh, whether being incarcerated or need to go through different services to kind of help them get to a better place. And those, I remember one time, one of the leaders of this organization, formerly Menergy, now Cordera, shared. He saw two examples. He saw examples of people where uh, they were in violent households, and that was just a norm. And then that became a way, to your point, desensitized of what they think they should do or what they think is normal for them. I've also seen in that situation where people say, I will go to the complete opposite. I'm going to be so far from anything that would make me do that. I'm not going to use anything to make me lose control. I'm not going to take it out on anyone in that way. So I've seen that. He also said another extreme that he saw was the people who kind of got everything. They were so spoiled in terms of anything they wanted, all the way down. He used this example of a gentleman where his underwear was ironed for him, right? Like all the way growing up, and then gets into a relationship and expects to be treated that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then now when that doesn't happen, when somebody's like, that's not normal, now thinks that violence is a normal way to resolve that. So in terms of personalities, it is this controlling, entitled belief, but it can look very different. It can be
Mm-hmm.
someone who was in a very violent household, and it can be someone who was in a perfect, great, loving environment, but thinks that the world should be theirs.
Yeah, I did grow up spoiled. I didn't have ironed undies, but I remember the sneakers, lottos. You remember those sneakers where the girls could change their little squares? My parents did not buy me those lotto sneakers. I was so hurt. But going back to the hurt and the pain, that can make someone angry, bitter, and a mean person.
Yeah.
How can that affect their everyday life? You know what I mean? So someone who has been traumatized, who goes through trauma, can that actually affect their everyday life and how they're living?
Yeah, there's lots of different information out there about like how trauma and negative experiences can impact people. For from my standpoint and my experience, that at least for most people will make them experience some level of depression, maybe even some level of
Mm,
anxiety, and that might be just a way that they see the world, or that bad things will happen because bad things did happen, and that bad things
right.
could happen again. And so for some of those people, once again, not all, it could get to the place where they don't really expect either much out of the world or others, or they expect people to disappoint them, or that they are in a place where they're just hurt. Even to like books that talk about things like the body keeps the score, they can
Mhm.
feel it in their body. They can experience different things. And even if we say someone who hasn't been through something traumatic, if we just say someone who's just like mean and grumpy, you just think
Mhm.
about like it's you're not a magnet to people if you're mean and
Right.
grumpy. People don't
Right.
want to be around you, and that could shape your life experience, right? That you might be that boss that people don't really like and talk about.
Mhm.
You might be that person in the neighborhood or that person in the family, because we probably all have at least one of those people in our family where they're just kind of mean and grumpy, and
Mhm.
it doesn't really make people want to be around you. And that can make you feel isolated, can feel lonely, can feel sad, and might not be the best experience for you in life because that might be the way you see the world.
True. Now, is there a such thing as having a personality disorder?
Yeah, there are things that we call personality disorders in when people diagnose. These are what we might say in access to person where personality disorders might show up. These are places where we might say the people who are on who might be characterized as personality disorders, that there's something that is uniquely different
Mhm.
about them that shows up in a certain way, and it's usually about how they interact with other people. So some examples, we might have heard of like a borderline personality disorder, right? Even sometimes antisocial personality disorder, that some people say, oh, you're just being that way. No, that's actually just how they are as a person, and how they show up. And so, uh, this doesn't mean that these people don't have good lives or that can be good people, but it might be just some of the challenges that they experience. And usually there's usually some other things that have shaped it along the way.
So we go through ups and downs all the times, trials and tribulations. It's just something that we go through. And It affects us. You know what I'm saying? So things that happen with your family, what can we do to make sure we keep that healthy, positive personality? How can one unpack all of the stress of the day and start fresh the new day? Like as for me being in victim services and hearing all of these horrible things that happen to people, I never become desensitized. So some of that stuff sticks with me and I'll wake up with it. How do we unpack the stress of the day and start new?
Yeah, it's a really great question in terms of that we all experience stress and we all should find ways to deal with it. And so if we go back to like early personality and just one aspect, like so there's the Myers-Briggs assessment, that's a personality assessment, and this is where people might say they're uh, you know E EN TJ, right? Like, are you an introvert? Are are you sensing? Are you someone who is intuitive? Like all these different things that kind of say parts of who you are. And so if I'm a introvert, how do I deal with the stress of the day is that I might need some time alone. I might
Mm-hmm,
need some time to recharge when I'm not around folks. Now, if you're busy doing life and parenting and other things, you might feel like I don't have my own time. It's very important that you find that space. If you're an
mm-hmm,
extrovert and you like being around people, but you're isolated because you're working remote, you might want to make sure you're meeting up with people. So it's being able to know your personality and then thinking about what things might work all the way to what you just mentioned around personality disorders. If you're someone who has narcissistic personality disorder and you think the world, everybody should serve you or be there for you or that you are the best, then you might realize, hopefully, that you need to get some support and some care because you might be treating people in a hurtful and harmful way, and that the way you're dealing with stress is actually taking it out on other people, and that's not the best way to do it.
and society, I think, has messed us up in many ways, and some things that you just spoke about. It's okay, not that you think the world is yours and you treat people bad, but it's okay that we're not all alike. I may not want to be around people all day, every day. Someone else may want to be around people all day, every day. How has society damaged us and how we should act?
Yeah, I think society has made us feel like one way, as you mentioned, is the preferred way. So, for instance, just thinking about if you're introvert, extrovert, society has made us feel like extrovert or being an extrovert is the preferred way, right? That if you're not out there being gregarious, meeting people, high-fiving, like being the life of the party, then there's something wrong with you. When that's not the
Mhm.
case. Even some of our jobs force us to be in front of folks, and it can be
Mhm.
emotionally draining, right?
Yes,
And that we need to recharge, and that's nothing wrong with that, right? Some of our, our society has made us feel like, hey, we need to look a certain way, we need to have a certain amount of money, and that means we might need to do something different with how we work or even our own purpose. Once again, personality might say, like, you know what, I really want to care for those who are underserved or those who are dealing with violence and abuse in their life. And the unfortunate truth is that's not a job or career or purpose that's going to make you a millionaire,
that's
right?
true.
And so society might make you feel like that's a wrong thing to do when those people need help and support. So recognizing that our personalities actually sometimes connect direct to our satisfaction and our purpose, and that could
Mhm.
bring us down to lots of places that's different than people in our family, people we went
Mhm.
to school with, people in our neighborhood, and it's okay to be different and to be uniquely you.
I agree 100%. I did switch professions a little bit. So, I used to be the executive director for Northwest Victim Services, and I was boots on the ground. and was not desk bound. So I was literally working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then I went over to the district attorney's office, and there I was dealing with homicides. So being on the scene with the body and offering crisis support to the family members. And I went so hard for so long, for like almost 9 years, and I had burned myself out. So then I switched professions, and I'm not doing direct services anymore. But Dr. James, I still get calls. And when I get those calls to help people and to move the mountain, I'm like, hey, what do you need? I'm not happy that the person got hurt, but I'm just like, give me something. Please let me help somebody. And I had to come to realize that's me. And my husband doesn't understand it. He's not in that line of work. My husband's in maintenance, but he just can't understand. He's like, see, you took another call. I did, because I love to help people, but that's my personality, and that's what I love to do. So I can't suppress that good in me. You know what I mean? To well, so I do understand now that I had to set healthy boundaries. So talk about healthy boundaries. Talk about how it's not selfish to do self-care.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and the way that you recognize, hey, this is me, and I am energized by that. I am fulfilled and satisfied by that. But like anything, too much of anything, any extreme can also get to a place where it's not the best for us, and that we need to have restrictions or limits or boundaries so that it doesn't overwhelm us. And boundaries is extremely important. And going back to, like, personality, just to the Myers-Briggs, part of like the areas that it looks like it said extroversion and introversion. There's a sense and an intuition. Is it like in my gut, or do I kind of think about it? Or am I thinking and feeling, right? Like, am I someone who's more like, I need the data versus like, oh, warm and fuzzies? And am I judging or perceiving? Like, all these areas put together make these unique personality, and there's plenty of other personality metrics that are out there. And to your point of boundaries, is that self-care is so important that I might not be my best self, my 100%, if I'm not practicing self-care. Like, people, especially in those areas where we have to give a lot, if we are not replenishing, and that could look different. That could mean, am I getting rest? Am I exercising? Am I doing things to make me feel good, like going on vacation or getting my nails done? Or am I journaling and really reflecting on who I am? Am I spending quality time? These are all levels of self-care. And what I've noticed for people sometimes who give a lot, they don't give themselves permission to take care of themselves.
That's
And that's
true.
really the key part, is that other people who probably aren't doing as much will give themselves permission to take a break. And the people who are
Yeah.
out there rescuing the world, they need the break the biggest. And that's an
Yeah.
act of self-care.
And you said something about personalities, the warm, fuzzy, and then those people who are not warm, fuzzy. So when I meet those people, because I'm just that bubbly person, I'm that warm, fuzzy, and I do admit too, like I'll touch somebody and I got to think, oh my goodness, did I offend that person? But it's not me. I'm just
Right,
giving you the
right.
warm touch. But I find myself shying away from people who are not a warm fuzzy, because to me you're giving me a negative vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people will say, once you have personalities, there's now like ways that we, like you said, we vibe with people. Some people will even say like we have these energy connections. And I know for me, it's like, if I'm out, like, or if I'm connecting with a client, or if I'm out speaking or doing something, the people who are like giving me that energy, those are the people like I'm giving the energy right back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's people where it feels like I gotta pull everything out.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and that's because of what really resonates with me. Other
Mhm.
people might say like, that's a lot, you're giving me a lot, I need you to bring it down. And so some of this is just, once again, our personalities, and then how our personalities connect with other personalities, and how it can be really meaningful. And so that becomes really important when we talk about like dating and relationships or
Mhm.
friendships, being
Mhm.
aware of how much do we want and need. And
Mhm.
sometimes we think we might need the exact thing of us, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not always the best. It's probably a little bit of a blend of something different with a little bit of some familiar.
That's probably so true because that's how it is with my husband and myself. We're like, I guess maybe total opposites, but I love them. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here once again.
Thank you so much for joining me today. We had a very interesting conversation on personalities. Understand you are unique and you are special. And remember, you could be the one to change the world. So put that smile on your face and get back to hugging people. I know it's still COVID and it's the flu. Put your mask on and give someone a big, loving hug. Peace and love.